Welcome, Motenta people. Peter Lorre was one of Hollywood's favorite bad guys. Anthony Hopkins, Hannibal Lecter, and Heath Ledger, Joker, stole the spotlight as a villain in their movies. But when it comes to notable bad guys, Peter Lorre was the original one. He was the first ever Bond villain and played the icon role of Le Chiffre in Casino Royale. His character in these films is usually some sort of criminal or insane character. Peter's acting is so good that we have trouble separating the man from the two-faced, bottom-feeding villainous characters who we have loved to hate. Was Peter Lorre born to be sinister? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Motenta's channel. But Peter wasn't a bad guy all the time. Peter Lorre was born Laszlo Lowenstein on June 26, 1904, in the Hungarian town of Rozsahegi, today called Rosenberg, in Slovakia. Peter was the first child of Alohoas Lowenstein and his wife Elvira Freischberger. His parents, who were both Jewish, had only recently moved there following his father's new job as the chief bookkeeper at the local textile mill. Peter's father was also in the Austrian Army Reserve, and so he was away a lot on military training. He left Peter at home alone with his mother a lot. When Peter was 4 years old, his mother suddenly died. It is thought that she died of food poisoning, as she was completely healthy just before her death. Her death left his father with 3 young sons, one of whom was only a few months old. He quickly married his wife's best friend, Melanie Klein, with whom he had 2 more children. Peter and his new stepmother never got along, and this obviously colored Peter's childhood. He claimed that she was so cruel to him that he often hid under his bed from her. When the Second Balkan War broke out in 1913, Peter's father anticipated that he might be called up if the conflict got bigger, and so he moved the family to Vienna. Peter's father ended up serving on the Eastern Front from 1914 to 1915, but was put in charge of a prison camp due to a heart condition that he had developed. This left Peter at home with his stepmother, and the family conflict continued to grow. He attended and graduated from a business school, and then got a job within his uncle's bank. He did have some commercial talent, but he had no interest in a business career. He was attracted to the stage, a career that his military-focused father did not approve of. His long-running battle with his stepmother and his need to do something he loved finally led Peter to make a break from the family home. He ran away at 17 years old and even slept on park benches when he didn't have money for anywhere else. Peter soon found work in Vienna, and his first job was with Richard Teschner, a famous Viennese puppeteer and artist of the time. Experimental psychologist and director Jacob Marino saw him performing and asked him to join his troupe, the Theater of Spontaneity, an improvisation group that performed in the area. Peter got to hang out at Café Hinenow with Franz Werfel, a poet, playwright, and novelist, and Billy Wilder, who was about to become a famous Austrian film director, producer, and screenwriter. It was an opportunity for Peter to learn more about the industry that he was about to be launched into. Peter honed his acting on the stage in Berlin as well, and under Bertolt Brecht, Peter acted in original productions of Happy End and Man It's Man. At this point, Peter played comedy and was a very good improvisation actor with the ability to make people laugh. It was while he was in the Berlin stages that he met Celia Lovsky. He wasn't the best-looking man, but he made her laugh, and the couple started dating. Celia could see the man Peter was before the characters took him over. Fairly early on in Peter's acting career, he garnered the attention of the famous German director Fritz Lang. Without much thought, Fritz saw something in Peter that made him cast him in the now famous role of Hans Beckert, a serial killer on the run from the police and other criminals that were prepared to hunt for him as well. It was the beginning of 2 film genres, police procedure and serial killers. It was a beginning for Peter, too, the first of his villainous characters. Although this was Peter's most memorable role of his early films, it's actually his third, but the movie was experimental and wasn't bringing in any money, and so Peter played a deranged monster by day and at night got paid to have audiences rolling in the aisles with his comedic talents. Harder than he anticipated, filming was hard work mentally and physically. Back in the early 20s, there were no stuntmen. The script had Peter falling down the stairs, and Fritz had Peter throw himself down the stairs. It took 12 takes before he was happy with the scene. M was the story of a mad diabolical mind, and despite this, or maybe because of it, the film was a huge success from both the audience's and critics' points of view. Audiences loved it, and it was even dubbed into English for the American audience. The Americans had seen Peter as the bad guy long before he got to their shores. The downside of playing such a sinister child murderer was that people had trouble separating Peter from his role, despite his chubby, cheerful face. Peter learned to hate his role in M, and later refused to talk about it in interviews or in person. 1933 brought the Third Reich, which started to flex their powers, and as a child of Jewish parents, Peter felt it wise to find another place to live. Celia and Peter quickly moved to London, a move that proved to be very good for his career. Alfred Hitchcock was looking to cast a sinister mastermind for his upcoming movie, called The Man Who Knew Too Much. An associate of Hitchcock had met Peter and recommended Peter to him. Hitchcock had seen M, saw how well Peter played the evil character, and really, it was a done deal. He just felt he should meet Peter first. Hitchcock and Peter met with Hitchcock doing most of the talking. Peter laughed a lot and nodded a lot. His English wasn't good enough for him to understand what Hitchcock was saying, and so he did his best to seem agreeable and enthusiastic. Something worked, as Hitchcock was happy to give Peter the job. He got over the language barrier by simply learning his lines phonetically in a parrot-like fashion. It's highly likely that Peter had no idea what his character was actually saying, but since a lot of his lines involved laughing diabolically, he managed to pull off the role very well. While London was a safer place for him, his background had him looking over his shoulder a lot and what was happening back in Germany. The day after filming finished, Peter and Celia got married and boarded a boat and sailed off to America. The newlyweds made their way to Los Angeles and quickly settled into life in America. Peter wanted his wife to be a stay-at-home wife while he brought home the bacon, but work was hard to find. He was offered work as a bad guy in Mad Love, based on his success in his 2 previous films. It seems he had been typecast before he even got to America. His start may have been slow, but once he got a couple of breaks, he was on his way. Charlie Chaplin once said that Peter was the screen's best actor. High praise indeed from one of the screen's greats. Peter settled into Hollywood and signed a contract with Columbia, but they didn't have any suitable parts for him. Peter had found an 1866 Russian novel called Crime and Punishment, in which he saw himself in the starring role. Columbia Pictures head John Cohn agreed to make a film adaptation of the book as long as he could lend Peter to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, probably to recoup some of his losses, as Peter had not appeared in any of Columbia's films to date. Crime and Punishment didn't go down well with American audiences, and Peter's portrayal of the role was considered too vulgar. After the lack of success with Crime and Punishment, Peter went back to London to work with Hitchcock again. This time, things didn't go too well on the set of Secret Agent, as Peter was acting alongside John Gielgud again. It's no secret that these 2 actors didn't get along, and Peter's habit of playing a bad guy so well, he upstaged the star, who was well known by then as well. There was, however, speculation that Peter had a drug habit, and that his attempt to withdraw from morphine was interfering with harmonious times on set. Whilst things on set were tense, Peter's second Hitchcock movie was well received, and Peter felt more confident headed back to America. 20th Century Fox offered him a 3-year contract on his return, and by accepting this offer led to one of the most iconic roles, Mr. Moto, a Japanese spy and detective. In a 2-year period between 1937 and 1939, Peter reprised the role in 8 back-to-back movies. He auditioned for the role of Quasimodo in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, but the film was aborted by MGM with no real reason given. Peter was becoming disillusioned with Fox at this point and managed to end his contract with them. In 1938, Universal Pictures wanted to hire Peter to play alongside Boris Karloff in the movie Son of Frankenstein. He declined as he thought this bad guy career was over now, that he had 8 beloved Mr. Moto films behind him. Peter was suffering from persistent gallbladder problems and had become addicted to morphine due to the pain and the quantity that he was taking. It turns out that the rumors about his drug addiction were true. Peter admitted himself into a rehab center, and Mr. Moto paid the bill. As we know, Peter was quite capable of doing his own stunts, and in the last Mr. Moto film he ever made, he hurt his shoulder and swore he wouldn't reprise the role again. Henry Silva stepped into the role, but he only made one movie in the role that Peter had made famous. Peter continued to be offered roles as menacing villains and murderous characters. The American public lapped up his performances, and he was typecast as the most evil of the evil guys. Peter was tired of always being the bad guy and turned down the roles. By the mid-1940s, Peter's career had taken an all-time low, and he was struggling to get the roles he wanted. His movie, Mr. District Attorney, was dubbed the worst picture of the year by the New York Times. Good news for him arrived in 1941, when he was naturalized as an American citizen and also offered a role as Joel Cairo in Maltese Falcon. This movie was a commercial and critical success, making $1.8 million for Warner Brothers. Working with Humphrey Bogart and Sidney Greenstreet improved his street credibility, and along with director John Huston, the four of them became good friends and a great filmmaking team. In the background, Peter's home life was a shambles. Celia and Peter were fighting, and in 1945 they managed to divorce without too much fuss being made in the press. One of the advantages of not being a top-billing star. They did, however, remain on friendly terms, and Celia worked as his manager, publicist, secretary, financial advisor, confidant, and nurse for the rest of his career. Even though there weren't any front-page stories about the relationship breakdown, Peter had been hanging out with notorious ladies' man Humphrey Bogart, so it's not hard to draw the conclusion that Peter may have been having an affair when he married Karen Verne, a German-born actress. Peter wasn't a star in his own right. He was never on the top billing nor commanded the biggest fees. He was most proud of his role in the Maltese Falcon and hated anyone remembering and bringing up his child-killing characters, or even Mr. Moto. He was our favorite bad guy, but not a big commercial star like his fellow actors. Peter believed that his lack of top billing was because he was not liked by Jack Warner, the studio head. Despite his on-screen personas, Peter was a fun-loving guy who liked to play pranks on people. He knew that Jack Warner hated smoking in his scenes, and he arranged for everyone to light up and fill a scene with cigarette smoke. When Jack saw it, he was incensed and demanded that the scene be reshot, at great expense. There's a good chance that a stunt like that didn't go down well, and it's quite possibly the reason that Jack Warner never gave him top billing. Still stuck with his bad guy tag, Peter was unable to land the types of roles that would make him happy, and so he turned to radio acting. He figured if no one could see his face, he might get the roles he was hankering for. It didn't work. In 1949, he not only filed for bankruptcy but also for divorce. He also decided to return to Germany and tried his hand as a cameraman in the German film The Lost One. It was based on a true story that Peter wrote the script for and starred in as well as shooting. But post-war Germany was trying to forget the war and wasn't interested in this story at all. Critics loved the fact that he was exploring the questions of accountability, guilt, and responsibility. He arrived back in the U.S. a year later with a new attitude. He had begun to accept that even though he didn't want to be cast as a bad guy in each and every movie, he began to accept that in that direction lay success. Along with his newfound attitude came love. Peter met and married Anne Marie Brenning not long after he arrived back in America. She wasn't a great beauty nor a famous actress, but she was what he needed at the time. It was with this wife that Peter had his only child, a daughter named Catherine. In 1954, Fritz Lang from his first successful movie contacted him about making a comeback and starring in his latest movie, Human Desire. Remembering back to the scorn and contempt he received when people couldn't distinguish between the character and the actor, he refused outright. However, when the role of Le Chiffre came along, Peter became famous for being the first Bond villain in the TV adaptation of Casino Royale in 1954. Family life really suited Peter. He shifted his focus from movies to TV and made appearances on TV, introducing the new generation to his menacing bad guy character, usually in comedic situations. It was good to see Peter not taking himself too seriously. In 1963, he joined Boris Karloff and Vincent Price in The Raven, a gothic horror about three rival sorcerers. A young Jack Nicholson clashed with his on-screen father, Peter, on and off set, and Peter managed to annoy the scriptwriter by constantly ad-libbing his lines. Maybe leopards can't change their spots. During the filming of Scent of a Mystery in Spain, Peter collapsed with a heart attack. Luckily for him, a doctor's convention was in town, and they were called and managed to revive him. For the rest of the movie, Peter had a double for all non-speaking parts to relieve the pressure on his body. His condition worsened, and despite conventional treatments, he wasn't responding. A doctor suggested the ancient practice of bloodletting, and Peter agreed. It turns out that he had blood clots from the heart attack, and the bloodletting got rid of them. The effects were instantaneous and miraculous. The legendary bad guy finally met his maker at the age of 59. Peter had a stroke just 4 days after the release of his second-to-last film, Muscle Beach. The pasty was released posthumously later in 1964. He was cremated and his ashes reside in Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Vincent Price read the eulogy, which was a fitting tribute to the world's best bad guy. However, his legend lives on along with his reputation. It's handy that some people can't tell the difference between the man and his characters. In 1977, 2 men posing as police pulled over Peter's daughter, Catherine, but upon discovering who she was, they let her go. Later, it was discovered that these officers were actually the infamous hillside strangler, Angelo Buono, and his sidekick, Kenneth Bianchi. Another creepy incident happened after Peter's passing. A young actor called Eugene Weingard started calling himself Peter's son. He bore a slight resemblance to Peter and had a very unhealthy obsession with Peter and the roles that he played. He wanted to change his name to Peter Lorre Jr., but Peter's wife and daughter fought it in court to stop him. They were successful. It seems that not all bad guys disappear when the curtains go down and the credits roll. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Peter Lorre, Hollywood's favorite bad guys. It was difficult to separate him from the characters he played. Yul Brynner also had interesting points in his life. Was Yul Brynner a drag queen? Let's find out from this video.